Example 3 asks us to determine the roots of this equation. The roots of the equation are the same as our x values. So as we look at this question, we're looking at what are the x values for this equation. So we have two methods that we can go and solve this with. Method number 1, we're going to take our equation and we are going to split it into two parts at the equal sign. So this will be one part and this will be the other. And we're going to put one part into y1 and the other into y2. So as we go to look at it in our calculator, y1 is going to be 5x squared minus 2x. y2 is going to equal 4x plus 3. So there are two pieces, and we are going to go and we are going to find the intersection points for these two graphs and figure out what the x values are. So we're going to find x values where the two graphs intersect. Okay, so as we go to do this, in our calculator, we are going to go and hit our y equals, and when we hit y equals, we're going to look at our calculator, put in the two equations into our y equals. We then need to go into our window settings. These are the default window settings, so if you reset your calculator, these are the ones that it has, and these are the ones I like to start with. And we can hit graph, see what we see. So as I go to hit graph, there's my first line, there's my second. I can see that it intersects here. I also see that it intersects somewhere up there, but it's a little hard to see. If we don't have that intersection point visible in the calculator, we are not going to be able to calculate it with the calculator. So let's take the graph, let's move it up a little bit more in this direction. We can get rid of some of the values down here. So that is going back to our window settings. We said we could get rid of some of our negative values. We had our positive going to 10, so let's take it to 20. And the scale is always how we are counting. What are the ticky lines on the graph going to be worth? And we could count them, we count by 1 still. That should work. And if we hit graph now, we can see that one point of intersection is right here, the other one is right there. So at this point now, we're going to hit second trace so we can do a calculation. We're going to go down to intersect. And for our first one, we're just going to hit enters. So it says first curve, we're going to hit enter. Second curve, hit enter. Guess is always an enter. And there's our intersection point. So we have an intersection point where x is negative 0.38 and y is 1.48. So negative 0.38 comma 1.48. Now, we got to go back and find the other one. So as we go to do that, we're going to go second trace and down to intersect again. However, this time, before we start hitting enters, we need to move along the curve so that we are closer to the other point. It will always calculate the point of intersection that you are closest to. So as we move along, now you can see the little flashing spider is closer to this point. It can be above, it can be below, it just needs to be closer to this point than it was to this point. If you do not move it before you hit your first enter, it will by default calculate the point it's closest to, so it would have kept coming back to this one. So now if we hit enter our 3 times, we now have a point of intersection at 1.58 and 9.32. Recall, if you need a little bit more written out steps or work through steps on how to find those intersection points. That our first task has those intersection point directions written down in there for you, so they are a very good reference point to help you find different calculation pieces on our calculator. So these were the points of intersection. And as we look at those points of intersection, we wanted the x values. So our roots are negative 0.38 and 1.58. Remember, points are always x first, then y. So our x values would be the roots. Method 2, we are going to move everything to one side. Everything to one side of the equal sign. So it equals 0, and then find the x-intercepts. Okay, so as we go to do this, we're starting off with our equation again. So 5x squared minus 2x equals 4x plus 3. This guy is positive, the x squared is positive, so we're going to move everybody to that because we do like the x squareds being positive. So as we move our 4x, we're going to subtract 4x from both sides because that was a positive. We have 5x squared minus 6x equals, that disappears, we're left with 3. And then that is a positive 3, so now move it to the other side, subtract 3 from both sides. Recall that as we go to do that, these guys do not get subtracted because one has an x and one doesn't. So we have 5x squared minus 6x minus 3 equals 0. At this point, we're going to split it at the equal sign again. So we've got this being our y1 and this being our y2. So we're going to stick this in our calculator into y1. We're going to stick this into our calculator in y2. Okay. So sticking that into our calculator, we have something that looks like that. We just finished doing a question using our graphing calculator. One of the things that I like to do is I like to leave my window settings because sometimes the old window settings will work for our next question. So at this point, I'm going to hit graph and see whether or not our previous window settings will work for this one. And if we look at it, we have an x-intercept there and an x-intercept there. So it does look like those previous window settings will work for us. So we don't have to adjust the windows. So that makes our lives a little bit easier. So we're going to go and find that intersection. So second trace down to intersect. And again, we're going to go with whatever that first one is. So we'll just do our 3 enters right now. Okay. So it gave me 1 point. It will calculate whichever point it happens to be closest to when it starts. In this case, the one it gave me first is the negative 3.78, comma 0. So there is our first point for our x-intercept. Going back to our calculator, we're going to go second trace down to intersect and enter again. This time, however, we are flashing right here, right near that first one. So we need to move, so we're by that one, so moving sideways along the curve so that our little flashing spider is closer to the other one. At this point, we can now hit our 3 enters and we get 1.58 for x and 0 for y. So our other point, 1.58, comma 0. So these our x-intercepts. And so from that, remember we want the x value, we would have our roots are negative 0.38 and 1.58. So points are always x first, then y, and both answers, notice, were exactly the same, just the way we got the work was slightly different.